appreciated that as well. I think that's just a nice feature that we have brought in. We have the main exit back here, and then we have an emergency exit over here, and another emergency exit in the back over there. So if you don't like what I have to say.
See you later.
I'm in a goofy mood this morning.
I know.
This is part 4 of a 5-part series of talks. Talk 1 looked at unconscious behavior that the ego uses to distract us from seeking the truth. Chapter 2 looked at the various ways we construct a personal identity. Chapter 3 looked at 2 primary inner voices, the ego and the soul, and provided some differentiation between the two. Chapter 4 examines the part emotions play in that differentiation. Emotions are caused by external things beyond our control that force us to have emotional explosions. The shrapnel from these explosions injures people, some innocent bystanders, who quite frankly should have seen it coming. With practice, we can learn to explode more effectively so that fewer innocent bystanders will get hurt. I hope at some point during that paragraph you were thinking, what the heck? That would have been the appropriate response to that message from my ego. That paragraph is also an example of how some people view emotions. In this view, the cause of emotional reactivity is external. Let's look at the rest of the paragraph, because my ego is notorious for mixing in enough truth to create the illusion of credibility. Caused by external things beyond our control. There's a truth gem that's probably 90% accurate. Only 90 because we can indeed influence things outside of us. However, the things that are reasonably within the purview of our control are few and personal. We actually have more control over ourselves than we want to take responsibility for. We actually, many other things, especially people, weren't meant to be controlled by us. Force us to have emotional explosions? Really? Should have seen it coming? Nothing like a little victim blaming. You've heard me say this before, there are only 3 kinds of work, mine, yours, and God's. When we're wrestling with negative emotions, a good starting question is, whose work am I doing? If something is truly beyond my control, it's God's and or another person's work. So why am I stressing? God doesn't even pencil in what I think needs to happen. God, universal consciousness as I call it, will help us put the thing that's out of our control into a framework of understanding. To let God be omnipotent, we have to surrender our own omnipotence and ask, help me understand this, instead of make this happen the way I think it should. God already knows what you want, knows you want to experience comfort and avoid pain. We already understand that positive emotions mean we got our way or something happened that we approve. We get that more of the same will bring more positive emotions. That's no small lesson. However, it pales in comparison to what anger, fear, and sadness can teach. I'm saying that pain is our greatest teacher, but what are painful emotions teaching? For starters, the negative ones are teaching us that we are listening to the voice of ego. We are basically interpreting an external stimulus as something that shouldn't be happening, or at least not to us. We don't like what has happened or is happening, and we create a narrative around it. The narrative is our story about what's happening being unfair or unjust, and it is the story that is creating the negative emotions. The story is coming from our ego. To recap, the ego is fabricated from the sum of our life's experience and the conclusions we have drawn from those experiences. The ego is not assembled from the fabric of truth. It is a voice from within that defends what we have already decided is true. It is a reflection of our self-image that is no more real than the image of you in a mirror. Emotions are words that reflect shared understandings. If I say, I'm mad, you get that, you've been mad too. The story the ego attaches to whatever is happening creates feelings in the body. That's the visceral part of emotions that we experience in the moment. The ego wants to validate those emotions, to justify them with a story. In doing so, it extends what could have been a mere momentary effect and turns it into a lasting effect. Then we don't get mad, we stay mad. The stories our ego creates are based on the past. It may be that we've had more fun on sunny days than rainy days. And there was that time that it was forecast to be sunny. So as far as my ego was concerned, it was supposed to be sunny. I had a picnic planned, and then it rained. According to my ego, rain ruined my day. I was forced to mope and complain about the weather. Clearly wasn't fair. And I was forced into a state of anger and sadness. Forced. I could have gone to a movie instead, but they won't let me bring fried chicken and potato salad into a theater. That would force the egos of the popcorn eaters to be mad and jealous. I could have found some other fun thing to do indoors and enjoyed the food just as well. But that would have deprived me of my justifiable misery. You ever been determined to be miserable to the extent that anything a person suggests that might relieve you of your misery is met with, no, that won't work? It's our God-given right to be miserable for as long as we want. To indulge the ego's narrative for as long as we want. To feel the emotions the ego is creating for as long as we want. Our ego spent a lot of time and energy justifying our negative emotions. Why let all that go to waste? A better question might be, why am I staying stuck in an ego narrative that makes me feel bad? Here's two good reasons for releasing negative emotions. They don't feel good, and they release a chemical called cortisol. Cortisol is released in response to stressors. It helps us cope with the immediacy of a situation, a fight or flight response. But it damages us if it lingers, increasing inflammation, disrupting sleep, and interfering with memory and learning. It's been associated with premature aging. Anger, sadness, fear, and joy are the basics. Anger and fear release cortisol, so does sadness, but only when repressed. Here's something interesting. Crying reduces our cortisol levels, especially when we reflect on how relieving tears can be, how they are our pressure relief valve. Most of the words we use to describe feelings aren't feelings at all, they're thinkings. Betrayed is a great example. Betrayed probably contains some of the basics, anger, sadness, and fear. However, betrayed describes the result of the ego's thoughts or conclusions. You don't feel betrayed, you think you were betrayed, which may only be an assumption. Emotions do the most damage when we refuse to feel them. sometimes we have no choice. We're just not ready. When that happens, we're pushing them into our tissues, storing them until a time comes when we are courageous enough to feel and learn from them. The worst part is they affect our thinking and behaving, and the effects are outside of our awareness. Finding and releasing those stored emotions is what chapter 5 is about. The message that negative emotions have for us is simple. You're believing your ego's narrative. This narrative may not be complete BS, but it is, at the least, an incomplete truth. Consider the loss of a loved one, very painful. The incomplete truth is that we will not have that person in our life, but did we stop loving them? Are the memories of that loved one erased? We may imagine that they are also grieving the way we are. The complete truth is that our grief is not shared by the deceased, who now travel on a plane so incredible that grief is dissolved by a bigger picture. Emotions exist to encourage us to seek the whole truth. Loss is one of the myriad ways life demonstrates impermanence to us. Loss gives us an opportunity to reflect on how much love we show others. They won't always be here to be loved, and we won't always be here to show love. Right now is the time for love. That's what loss is saying. The greater the pain of loss, the more blessed we are to have had the opportunity to have loved so much. Loss feels terrible to the ego with its limited insight, not as much to the soul that sees the bigger picture. My ego often convinces me that I'm a victim of my circumstances. If I'm a victim of my circumstances, then I had nothing to do with causing them. And I'm relieved of the opportunity to learn, both from my emotions and my circumstances. I'm relieved of responsibility. And my ego loves that. Our responsibility is to learn from pain that love still exists. Negative emotions are serving a very valuable purpose. They exist to tell us that we are listening to an ego narrative, for there we can get quiet and listen from a place that has nothing to do with protecting an image or changing a situation or relieving pain, nothing to do with what we're feeling. We can move from the ego's personalization to the observational perspective of our soul. We can look for the rich depth of whatever is happening. When we are with the richness without a goal in mind, emotions become a conduit between our ego and our soul. That sentence is the crux of this chapter. Emotions are the conduit between our ego and our soul. Mad and sad are manifestations of fear. With sad, we're afraid of how long the sadness might continue or how intense it might become. With anger, we're fearful that we can't do anything about the angering situation and fearful that we might be part of the problem. Fear is our least comfortable emotion because it relates to mortality. Our ego converts fear into mad or sad, which are less likely to remind us of our mortality. While we can process through mad and sad, fear is the place we fear being stuck. Mad and sad are masks that fear wears. If mad and sad are manifestations of fear, we've reduced our basic emotions to fear and joy. But joy is love. So there's only love and fear. Fear has a foundation in false or incomplete ego narratives, so only love is real. When I say that fear isn't real, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. saying that the narratives it's founded on fall apart under scrutiny. No matter how fearful the circumstances, love still exists, and we can still align ourselves with it. Sometimes love is misguided. We can confuse love with the ego's grasping and clinging, confuse it with preferences. But when the ego's fears are observed and examined, their falsehoods rise to the surface, where love is waiting with a healing truth. Fear is always incomplete, and love is always the whole truth. I talked about sadness and anger being manifestations of fear. So is hate. Have you ever hated something that you didn't also fear? I hate the Seahawks because I fear they may continue beating up my 49ers. We may project the vitriolic energy of hate onto others, but first we have to gather it unto ourselves. I can't pass hate along to you without its energy damaging me first. Emotions affect us directly with the influence that they have on our behavior and by causing the release of cortisol, which damages our body, and by causing emotional suffering. Noticing the suffering is the trigger through which we can consciously shift from fear to love. From justifying our negative emotion to searching for an expanded perspective. We can go from noticing the suffering to identifying the ego's fear-based narrative. How do we know if we're moving from ego to soul, from fear to love? If we're shifting from listening to the ego to listening to the soul, our emotional status will shift. The contraction we were feeling will shift to a feeling of expansion. The situation may stay the same for now. The people involved may stay the same, but the view of it will be expanded beyond judgment. Instead of seeking a place to put blame, we are only seeking truth and understanding. The shift can be immediate, but can also be incremental. We sometimes have an epiphany that suddenly and dramatically shifts our attitude and consequently our emotions. What's more likely is that the shift will be gradual and related largely to how courageously and objectively we are willing to see a circumstance, see the ego's narrative. Gratitude helps. Forgiveness helps. Curiosity is perhaps the most helpful. Gratitude only requires that you acknowledge that things could be worse. Forgiveness only requires that you sincerely wish another the healing they need. Curiosity only requires that you believe in the magic of existence, where what is what it's supposed to be. I'm going to summarize this all with some core truths. Emotions are purposeful and useful, not coincidental. Emotions tell us whether we're listening to the voice of ego or the voice of soul. There's only love and fear, and only love is real. Fear is based on the false narratives of the ego. These narratives are designed to protect an image that isn't real, or bring us pleasure, or help us avoid pain. We can observe the falseness of the narratives and invite our soul to counter them with truth. We can experience an emotional shift when our soul participates in the narrative, letting us know that we are indeed approaching spirituality. Namaste.
Thank you, Don. That was brilliant. Really good talk. No, you really narrowed it down.
My ego swell.